for you, what comes to mind as a ripple effect from Harden leaving OKC?
Man, it's a couple of things. I think for sure they probably win at least one or two championships. So you might get that matchup again with the Miami Heat. You know what I mean? Maybe instead of it being the Warriors kind of down the line, honestly feel like they probably would have played the Thunder a couple more of those times had James Harden stayed. Because, after he left, they were trying to find anybody to fill in that 6-man role, whether it was Kevin Martin, Jeremy Lamb, Reggie Jackson, certain guys like that. But it just never came up the same way. You know what I mean? Because James was so elite. And then another thing is, I don't think if he stays, all three of them eventually get a league MVP. Obviously, KD got his, I believe, a year or two after, which was nice. And then Russ a couple years, and then James. But James is going to be a superstar regardless. You know what I mean? So how do you keep him as a 6-man while his game is trending up? I know a lot of people at the time were like, oh, maybe he could be like Manu Ginobili and all this. But you got to remember, Manu was already like a seasoned vet when he came to the States. He already had played and was winning in Argentina for most of the time. But James was on his way up. So I think that probably would have caused a lot of friction eventually if, Coach Brooks would have been like, oh, well, just sit on the bench, even though you're averaging this much.
Man, I find it very interesting too with that aspect of Harden turning into who Harden was going to be. If they keep him, they have to start him. If they decided to keep him, they would have had to start him, move somebody else to the bench. My thing, I look at it too, is like, do we see Russ turn into a triple double machine if Harden stays? Because that's another facilitator right there. Somebody else that needs the balls in it. The ball, I said balls, need the ball in their hands is Harden, Westbrook, KD, which he made it clear throughout the entire starting five series. If you didn't know before, he is about playing team ball. I think KD would have been fine because KD ended up, he stayed there with Russ the entire time. I think at most they get is maybe one or two, but because we saw the dynamic of the Russell Westbrook aspect, who was also in ascension, and they kind of had a clashing of personalities and viewpoints of who the number one guy is. I think it gets halted probably at like two, which we kind of see of some of these best teams in general. Egos sometimes eventually get in the way. I have something in mind for my career that doesn't align with this, i.e., Kobe. So I think at some point they would have broke apart anyway, just off of that alone, because they were all young too. So we're all young. I have this idea in my head for my career. It's not gonna happen if I'm still here with these three. It's not gonna happen if so I think they break apart at some point. I think the other ripple effect I think about it is if they stay together and they get that ring, what does that do for Bron's legacy? Because I agree with KD. That team coming back the following season, I don't know if I don't know if Miami gets it done again because Miami lost that first one. They got the experience, figured out, all right, this is what we need to do. Boom, 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 boom. Who's to say OKC doesn't have that same result? And you talking about KD, Russ, Harden, Ibaka, and I think Harden would have been the X factor that following year. They didn't have an answer for Harden. And I think he gets a ring to his name, and that changes his trajectory too. Because you had a ring to Russ' name, Harden name. We talk about them a lot differently, bro.
Yeah, I agree, bro. You're gonna talk about them a little bit different because they're gonna be in that upper echelon of their position because they were able to win. And Harden was really like the X factor in that Heat series when they played in 2012, but he didn't show up. That's how they were able to get so far. And that was a natural progression they were going. 2010, they started out, they lost in the first round, but pushed the eventual champs, the Lakers, to 6 games and almost forced the seventh game. The next year they get to the conference finals. Then the next year they get to the finals, and then it's all done. And this was before when championship windows were a little bit more wider at the time. They weren't shut so quick. So it's almost like they did it like how stuff happens now. It just kind of seems like, you know what I mean, where the windows be so small. But it was fun for what they were able to do, but I do kind of wish they were able to prolong it a little bit more.
Facts. And I think also it kind of works out, obviously, for OKC now that we have 2020 hindsight and we see what happened years later. If they stay together, they don't get SGA. They're not going to be that bad. I feel, to even be in position to be a part of that trade for Paul George and Kawhi to be facilitated to the Clippers. SGA comes over there. So in the long run, obviously it worked out for them. They probably would have just got a ring sooner instead of having to wait up until last year to get a ring.